This child isn't Mama's baby. The day after I gave birth to my daughter, my son, who had a mysterious power, looked at the baby in my arms with a strange expression. Then, he burst into tears. My sister is going to be killed. As I hurriedly tried to comfort my son, I glanced beside me and saw my husband suddenly turn pale and start shaking violently. Later, when we checked the baby, we discovered an unbelievable truth. I vowed to uncover the whole story. My name is Maggie, and I'm 36 years old. I work from home for a major advertising agency. I lived in a spacious, newly built house with my husband and our 4-year-old son. I met my husband, Ben, 7 years ago through a friend's introduction and got married. He was a pediatrician who graduated from a top university and worked at a general hospital. Ben was a kind-hearted man who understood my work, and I was proud to call him my husband. Soon after we married, our son Ethan was born. When Ethan was about 3 years old, Ben's wealthy parents built us a lovely house. With a kind doctor for a husband, an adorable son, and a house in the city, I thought I was living a blessed life. It happened when Ethan had just turned 4. Suddenly, he pointed at my belly and smiled. "Mama, there's a baby in your tummy." Ethan was just grinning and looking happy. I was confused, but I had my suspicions, so I went to the hospital the next day. The doctor confirmed that I was in the early stages of pregnancy, and I was overjoyed. When I got home, I told my son about the pregnancy. "Ethan, there's a baby in my tummy." "You were right. It's a girl. I'm going to be her big brother." Even though it was too early to know the gender, my son insisted the baby in my belly was a girl. "How did you know I had a baby inside me?" I asked. "The baby told me she was there," he replied. I had long suspected that my son might have some sort of mysterious power. Once, when we visited my parents' house, Ethan looked at my father and cried, saying, "I see something fuzzy in Grandpa's chest." Shortly after that, my father was diagnosed with an illness, but thanks to early detection, it didn't turn into anything serious. Ethan might have some kind of special ability, I told my husband Ben. He laughed it off, saying, "That's unrealistic." But anyway, the pregnancy was joyous news. When Ben came home late, I told him about the pregnancy. "I see. We've been trying for a second child for a while, so I'm happy." "Take good care of yourself," Ben said, just as I had imagined. He was delighted, and I felt his warm embrace. At that time, Ben was working a lot of overtime and night shifts, so he was rarely home at night. You know, for this birth, with Ethan in preschool and all, I was thinking it would be a huge help if you could take paternity leave, I suggested. But Ben's face suddenly clouded over. "That's impossible. You know about my work, right? We're already short-staffed, and there's no way I can take paternity leave." "Is that so? Couldn't you work something out if you let them know early?" I pressed. "When something's impossible, it's impossible," he insisted. "I know, why don't we ask your mother to come and help after the birth?" "I see. All right, I'll talk to my mother," I agreed. Ben doted on Ethan, but because he was so busy, I was essentially left to do all the child rearing on my own. It was tough for me since I was working too, but somehow I managed to juggle housework and childcare every day. In the end, we decided that my mother would come to help after the birth of our second child. I felt a little sad because I had wanted to raise the children together with Ben, but I understood his work situation, so I didn't complain. After that, my pregnancy progressed smoothly with hardly any morning sickness. When I was about 6 months pregnant, Ethan's preschool scheduled a recital. Try to take the day off to watch Ethan at the recital, okay? I asked Ben. I know. I've already requested the day off, and I'll definitely be there, he promised. But on the day of the recital, he suddenly said, an urgent work matter came up, and I can't go. I watched over Ethan alone at the recital, feeling quite dissatisfied with Ben. After the recital, I took Ethan home and waited for Ben to return, intending to confront him. Suddenly, Ethan pointed at the TV screen. There's a lady who's good friends with Papa. On the TV, a rerun of some variety show was playing. The screen showed a beautiful female celebrity laughing loudly and clapping her hands. At the time, I didn't pay much attention, thinking Ethan was just saying random things. After Ethan went to bed, Ben came home. I was about to confront him about missing the recital, but for some reason, his face was deathly pale. His behavior was so strange that I decided not to press him. Perhaps something serious had happened at work. From then on, Ben seemed to be troubled by something, but he wouldn't talk to me about it. I decided to quietly watch over him, thinking it must be work-related stress. As my due date approached, my husband was busy and couldn't seem to take time off. 2 days after my due date, I finally felt contractions. I immediately contacted Ben asking him to come pick me up, but there was no response. Disappointed but determined, I quickly left Ethan with my mother and headed to the hospital where Ben worked by myself. As soon as I arrived at the hospital, I was put on the delivery table, and I gave birth. Hearing the cute cry of my baby, I felt relieved. The midwife let me hold my newborn baby. Your name is Charlotte. Thank you for being born safely. At that moment, I noticed a small red birthmark on Charlotte's back. After the post-delivery procedures, I entrusted Charlotte to the midwife and returned to my room, where I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, Ben was by my bedside, peering at my face. You're awake. I'm sorry I couldn't be here for the delivery. You did well. His gentle voice made me feel at ease. Just then, the midwife brought Charlotte in. I'm going to bring Ethan now. He must be excited to meet his little sister, Ben said as he left the room. I smiled, gazing at the peacefully sleeping Charlotte. After a while, Ben returned with Ethan. Ethan, you've been such a good boy. Look, this is your little sister, Charlotte, I said, showing him the baby. Ethan furrowed his brow. This child isn't Mama's baby. As I was puzzled by his words, Ethan's eyes suddenly filled with tears, and he looked frightened. My sister is going to be killed. Then he began to cry loudly. "Oh, Ethan, what's wrong? Come here," I said, trying to comfort him. But even as I hugged him, he kept repeating the same words and wouldn't stop crying. As I was desperately trying to calm him down, I looked up at my husband and gasped. Ben had turned deathly pale and was shaking violently. "What's wrong?" "Ben, you look awful," I called out to him. With a trembling voice, he said, "I just remembered something I need to do," and left the room. Ben was clearly acting strange. Between Ethan's words and Ben's behavior, I didn't know what was going on. Confused but needing to take care of Charlotte, I started to change her clothes and was shocked. The red birthmark I had seen right after the birth was no longer there. After having my mother pick up Ethan and take him home, I immediately called a nurse and requested a blood test for my daughter. The next day, the results came back, and the baby's blood type was AB. I'm type O, and Ben is type A. In other words, it was a blood type that shouldn't have been possible for our child. I was in turmoil over these results. This child isn't mine. How could this happen? Where is my real daughter? I was certain that Ben was involved in this somehow. I tried to call Ben immediately, but I was told by the staff that he hadn't come to work and they didn't know where he was. Determined to find the real Charlotte, I decided to consult with a nurse first. However, on my way to the nurse's station, I saw something that made me feel as if I'd been struck by lightning. At that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. Late that night, I was hiding in the shadows. Then I heard footsteps coming down the dark hallway. The person walking towards me was undoubtedly Ben. Ben stopped in front of a hospital room door and put his hand on the doorknob. "That's not my room, you know," I said. "Maggie, what are you doing here?" The nameplate on the hospital room door read Sarah. It was the same name as the female celebrity Ethan had pointed out on TV. What I had seen earlier in the day was this nameplate. "There's a lady who's good friends with Papa," Ethan had said at that time. "Why are you trying to enter Sarah's room?" I asked. I have some pediatrician business." Ben stammered. "At this late hour?" I pressed. Ben held his head in his hands. "It would be inconsiderate to make a fuss in the hallway." "Let's go inside," I said, entering Sarah's room with my husband. "Hey, who's that woman? Are you a fan of mine or something?" "Stop bothering me, Sarah," the petite beauty I had seen on TV said from her bed. "I'm Ben's wife. More importantly, let me see your baby," I said, looking into the baby crib next to Sarah's shocked face. Checking the back of the small, sleeping baby, I saw the birthmark I had noticed before. "Hey, what are you doing to someone else's child?" Sarah exclaimed. "No, this child is my baby," I insisted. Ben grabbed my arm, saying, "Hey, Maggie, what are you talking about?" I shook him off and threw the blood test results onto Sarah's bed. "The baby in my room has a blood type that couldn't possibly come from Ben and me. And this birthmark on the back. I clearly remember seeing this mark on my baby right after she was born. This child is mine. As I said this all at once, Ben tried to calm me down with a forced smile. A baby's blood type can change, and you might have mistaken the birthmark. Calm down. Are you feeling off because of postpartum stress? If that's the case, we can do a DNA test to find out if this child is mine, right? I said, picking up the baby and glaring at Ben. He grew increasingly pale. First of all, what business did you have in her room in the middle of the night? Explain that, I demanded sternly. Sarah furrowed her brow and sighed. Oh well, I guess the cat's out of the bag. You were having an affair with my husband? I asked. Sarah seemed to have given up and admitted to her relationship with Ben. They had met at a party, and when she found out Ben was a doctor, she became interested in him. She knew he was married but started seeing him anyway. When they realized Sarah was pregnant, it was too late, and she had no choice but to have the baby. The timing of Sarah's pregnancy discovery coincided with Ethan's recital. That day, when Ben skipped the recital and came home looking pale, he must have just been told about Sarah's pregnancy. I struggled to contain my rising anger. I understand that you two were having an affair and that you were both pregnant at the same time. But why did you switch the babies? You're the only one who could have done that in this hospital, right? I glared at Ben as I spoke. He sighed and shrugged. Sarah said she didn't want to raise the child even after giving birth, Ben explained. Sarah nodded as if it were obvious. I'm officially on a break right now, but I plan to return to my career as a celebrity soon. I don't want the public to know I had a child out of wedlock, and besides, I don't even like children. I couldn't believe what Sarah was saying. Sarah said she would either put the baby in a baby hatch or stage an accident to end its life. I felt sorry for the baby. But I couldn't let you two find out. Ben trailed off. So why did you switch the babies? I demanded angrily. Ben averted his eyes. Well, Sarah is prettier, so her child would probably grow up to be beautiful too. I wanted a cute daughter, so I thought I'd have you raise her. At that moment, I was silently furious. Now that we've been found out, there's nothing we can do. I know. Why don't you raise both of them? We can say they were twins. I'll earn the money, so you shouldn't have any complaints, right? Ben suggested. That's right. That's a good idea. Well, my daughter will definitely be prettier anyway, Sarah chimed in. I glared at them as they started saying such outrageous things. Don't be ridiculous. How could you switch babies for such a stupid reason? What were you thinking? So you were planning to get rid of my daughter. You're the worst. Sarah and Ben looked startled when I raised my voice. As Ben tried to calm me down, saying things like, "Take it easy," I spoke in a low voice. Do you think you can get away with doing something like this, using your position as a doctor? I can cover it up somehow. I'm trusted in this hospital, Ben said confidently. I wouldn't be so sure about that, I replied, looking towards the door of the room. Ben and Sarah followed my gaze. There stood a nurse with a stern expression on her face. Actually, I had explained the situation to her beforehand and asked her to secretly listen to our conversation. As Ben panicked, the nurse said, "Intentionally switching babies is a serious matter. I'll report this to the supervisor." Faced with the unyielding nurse, my husband grew increasingly pale. "This is a proper crime, you know. If I tell the police, you might be arrested," I said firmly. Ben and Sarah suddenly began to panic. "Maggie, please don't say things like that. Don't make this a big deal," Ben pleaded. "No, I will never forgive you. And Sarah, you too," I said, glaring at her. Sarah flinched as I stared her down. "You, who tried to have me raise your child while treating Charlotte poorly, are beneath contempt. I work at an advertising agency, so I have connections with weekly magazines. You understand what I'm saying, don't you?" I threatened. "No, if this gets out, I won't be able to return to my career as a celebrity. Please, anything but that," Sarah begged. Ben and Sarah finally got down on their knees before me. "We're sorry, please forgive us. Please forgive me, Maggie," Ben cried, pressing his forehead to the floor as he broke out in a cold sweat. "Who would forgive you? Ben, we're getting a divorce. Be prepared to pay damages for adultery to both of us," I declared. Ben and Sarah slumped in defeat. Ben was taken away by the nurse, and Sarah collapsed onto her bed, sobbing loudly. Without looking back, I took Charlotte and returned to my room. Later, DNA tests confirmed that Ben had indeed switched the babies. I consulted with the police, but it seems they couldn't press charges. I divorced Ben, received the house and the property settlement, and got $50,000 in damages along with half of the child support for Ethan and Charlotte in a lump sum. We agreed that he would pay the remaining balance of $2,000 per month. As a result of me leaking this incident to a weekly magazine, Sarah became ostracized by society. She paid me damages and then disappeared somewhere. Sarah's daughter ended up being raised by Ben's parents, who are now estranged from Ben. I hear that Ben is now working at a hospital in a remote area, earning money to pay child support for 3 children. As for me, I'm raising my 2 children as a single mother. Ethan and Charlotte get along well, and seeing them play together brings me immeasurable happiness. I hope to continue working hard to ensure that